Hi, I'm Gerard Virga, and welcome to the Florida Family Law Attorney Podcast. This is season one, episode 17. And today we have a guest who I've known almost my entire career, Dan Estes. And I remember probably back in 2000 and walking into my office, I think he was just starting his process serving private investigative agency and handed me a card. And we've been working with Dan and collaborating on cases here in the 14th Circuit for, almost 20 years now. It's hard to believe. We were a lot younger back then, weren't we?
Yeah, have more hair.
Yeah, you had more hair and I had more color. So yeah, it's been a long time. It's been a long journey. Dan is just a good person in our community and does a lot of investigative work. And over the years, a lot of his investigations have moved more into interviewing and analysis and lie detection and kind of some of the more interesting aspects of investigations and assisting lawyers with cases. And so we definitely wanted to get you on, Dan.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your agency and, your involvement in the community?
Yes. Well, I've been a private investigator, like you said, since 2006. I've been in Panama City for about 35 years now. And started the private investigative agency. And like you said, you're probably one of my first clients. I know at least right after, I think it was another attorney. The same day, I walked across the street to your office, and we've been doing work ever since. And like you said, we do private investigative work in all categories. We do lie detector testing, statement analysis. We do some cell phone forensics. Of course, most private investigators do some sort of surveillance, and we've done all that. Court testimony. We work criminal cases, civil cases, you name it. We probably have worked it over the years.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of cases, we've collaborated with you and, one way or another. I know that, we use you for a lot of process serving.
Yes.
I know that we've, used you for, I think we have done in another life when I was a criminal attorney. I think we did do some CSBAs with you.
Yes.
Some stress analysis on the voice for people who don't know what that is to look for truthfulness or deception. It's been a pleasure, working with you, on those and then learning about some of these new technologies and some of the forensic stuff you've even done with, extracting data from cell phones and things of that nature. When people hear private investigator and you haven't hired a private investigator before, people kind of think of like Hollywood type scenarios and they do the same thing with lawyers. In fact, when I used to watch TV, the lawyers had a much glamorous life than I had, or much more interesting, action-packed life. Or a lot of our clients still think that you should be like Perry Mason, and the whole thing's going to be resolved in 30 minutes, and somebody's going to break down on the stand and just admit they did it. And there's a big difference between Hollywood and real life, as most of us know. How do you think private investigative work like yours differs in real life versus Hollywood movies?
Well, one of the things, like you said, people have that expectation that Hollywood is what is reality when it's not. And we have like cases all the time where people come in and their expectation is that they're going to get, a private investigator to go break in their house or put a camera in someone's bedroom and catch them doing all kinds of stuff. And in reality, that stuff you just can't do. I mean, we can do a lot of things. We use, like you said, digital forensics, lie detector testing, a statement analysis. These things are all grounded in methods that have been proven and admissible in court. And a lot of times, the expectation from TV is that you can do something that you really can't do. And that's what we see when we talk to clients, some of your clients, and they looking for something that's just not feasible. And if it is feasible, I mean, probably going to go to jail for doing it. And you just can't do some of the things that people expect you to do. So the clients just don't realize what they're looking for. The question I get more than anything is, I've never used a private investigator. What can you do? And then once we explain to them what we can do, it kind of helps them outline their expectation.
Yeah, I think, over the last 20 years, there were always laws and rules, but I do think privacy rules and privacy laws, especially with tracking, GPS tracking, things like that, have really kind of tightened up. And societal expectations on privacy have kind of tightened up, which I think makes, your job more difficult, obviously. and you have to be very narrow and very careful with what it is you're doing because you might inadvertently get yourself in trouble. And I think
Yes.
a lot of people don't realize that.
They don't. We have people all the time that want us to track a family member or spouse or even a kids. And in some cases, you can use trackers. In the state of Florida, you just can't pop a tracker on anyone's car. It used to be that way, but over the last, I guess, 15 years, state legislature have changed and they now to put a GPS on a vehicle, you have to have it's got to be registered to the person. They got to be obviously living in the same house. And so there's a lot of things that have changed that are really kind of tied our hands with stuff that used to be legal. And now you have to be careful when you hire a private investigator that they understand the rules and limitations of doing stuff like that because you can get your client in trouble as well as yourself, lose your license, livelihood, your professional credentials. So you have to be careful and just follow the rules. And if you hire a competent investigator, they know the rules.
Yeah, one of the things I know that's transpired is in the middle of a family law case or a divorce proceeding like that, using the trackers
Mhm.
has really, been curtailed by the legislature and you can get in trouble for it. And people may say, why? Because I own the car, it's our car, it's a marital car. But the issue, that we're trying to focus in on and alleviate is in a lot of cases, you have people who are victims of domestic violence
Yes.
and the abuser or the alleged abuser could put a tracker on the car and know where the person was going, if they're at a safe house, if they're, follow them around, stalk them. So that was one of the, I think impetus, for some of that was, to prevent further domestic violence and to offer people more safety along with protection of privacy. I think you touched on something, Dan, that's kind of been a focus of mine this last year and probably going to continue to be a focus because it's a big task. And it's one of the reasons we do the podcast is, after doing this for 20 years, I think I've come to the conclusion that unfortunately, a lot of people who work with us or come into our office or have these issues don't have grounded expectations of what the legal system can do, what investigators can do, what the purpose of it is, how it works. And, this was a one in one way trying to increase communication, increase education of people going through these scenarios and these life-changing events because I think a lot of times people feel a lot of stress because they're in a situation they don't understand. There's lots of great websites and things out there, but sometimes people come in and their legal advice has come from Google or from AI, and AI's got a lot of great tools and benefits, but nothing beats, talking to someone like you and getting the firsthand account of what happens and, to give people a peace of mind and some good information on what can and cannot be done and how to use these tools. Dan, how do you go about educating potential clients about the process, about using the private investigator and kind of setting good expectations for them so that they know how to most effectively use you? Obviously, you're running a business, so it's not free. So, how to get the most bang for their buck? Because that seems to be a very big question in today's economy. How do we, get the most out of this? How do you help people who are obviously probably going through some anxiety, because they're in the middle of one of these life changing events?
Well, one of the things I do up front is I try to build trust with the client. They're coming in, they've never worked with a private investigator. Most of them never even met one before. And so they're walking in, like we just spoke about, with that Hollywood expectation that they're going to get something that they may not, and they're unsure. And so the first thing I try to do is kind of calm them down and say, hey, look, you got an issue. We're going to help you work through it if we can. If we can't, we're going to tell you. And so I try to set that framework before I start getting into the case, kind of getting them to relax, getting them to just talk to me and telling me what they want, what their expectations are, what they're looking for, and then I can better help them. And the biggest thing, I try to do is to build that trust so that they know they're working with somebody that's not going to take advantage of them. And then I ask them, do you have an attorney? If they say they have an attorney, I tell them, look, before you hire me, you need to make sure what I'm going to be doing for you, your attorney can use for your case. Because if I'm out there doing work that your attorney can't use, they're wasting their money. And
And
so I
that's
tell them, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, that's something, I think that's critical that you touched on that because like in Florida, for instance, a lot of people think like adultery is a huge game-changing thing, and we're basically a no-fault state. Adultery can come into play maybe with alimony. Adultery can maybe come into play depending on the facts and circumstances in a custody case, if the children were exposed to something that was inappropriate. But other than that, I tell people all the time, if you want to hire the investigator for your own peace of mind, so you have the answers. That's fine. And we may be able to introduce it in court to a limited degree,
Yes.
but we're not going to be able to have a full blown trial on adultery because we're a no fault state. So that's a key point. I think using the attorney and the investigator as a team and figuring out really what the objectives are early on. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just kind of think that that was a very critical kind of thing to point out to the audience that, you know, you might have great evidence that Dan or another private investigator has collected, but if it's inadmissible or it has no relevance, then it doesn't do a whole lot for the actual case and the
Yeah.
results.
I've had clients come in and said, I hired a private investigator. They did X, Y, and Z. I took it to my attorney and they said they can't use it. And my response is that's why you need to communicate with your attorney that you planning on hiring a private investigator and you want to know if what they can do to help my case. And if they do that, and then they go to an investigator that's going to give them the right information, they're going to get the best results. And sometimes you get no results. And that's the other thing I have to, always explain to the client. We may not find what you're looking for. So when you hire a private investigator, you have to hire them with the understanding that they may not get what you want because what you want may not be out there. And
And that's
investigators are not just going to make up something so that they can satisfy their client. I know I don't.
and that's a critical thing too. Sometimes no result's a good thing.
Yes, it is.
It may not be good for the case because maybe you wanted this smoking gun evidence or you want it, but if you're looking into someone and maybe if they have a substance abuse problem and you suspect it, and the investigator, is maybe following them around, does a trash pull, talks to the neighbors, whatever the course of the investigation might be, and there's no evidence, maybe your assertion was wrong, but that may be the best thing for your kids that there's no substance abuse problem.
Sure. I had a case like that. I worked a case where the client she thought her husband had a gambling problem and, there was money missing. He was taking cash and she thought something was going on. And it turned out it was something totally innocent. And she was happy with that outcome. But for a while, before she hired us, she was certain that there was something going on and there wasn't. So it turned out to be a good result in that
Oh,
case.
I think that I think that's another good point. I think I've had experience with this, and I think you just kind of pointed it out. You may have a marriage that's kind of teetering on distrust, or there may actually, I guess, if you're hiring a private investigator, there probably is distrust. And then you find out that you were wrong, and maybe you owe the other side an apology down the road. But, in that regard, sometimes no evidence is good evidence, and you might be able to, save a marriage because a lot of people don't realize this, but family law attorneys are kind of charged with attempting to try to help you save your marriage if we can. Nobody's advocating for divorce. We advocate for the client, but we don't take joy in that. If I could save every marriage that came in here, I would.
Yeah, sure.
And I could get people back to being happy. But Dan, one of the things I wanted to touch on with you that I think is, really interesting is statement analysis. I know that's something you do. Can you explain exactly what is statement analysis and how it helps you uncover deception in family law cases?
Statement analysis basically is you using the person's words um, to determine if they're being deceptive or if they're leaving out information. And it's very effective once you learn how to do. I've been through the training, and over the years, I've taken many classes and gone through a lot of training and statement analysis. Once you learn how to do it, it's very effective. And the way it works is, let's say, for example, somebody gave you a written statement and you look at that written statement and by analyzing the words that that person used, you can tell if they're being honest or not. And it's a very effective tool that I use all the time in cases. Because if somebody give me a statement, um, I'm going to go through it and analyze the words. And Communication is 7% verbal or words, 55% body language, or 55% body language, and 35% tone. But
Right.
those words are important. And when you combine that with body language and tone, you get an effective communication method that can tell you a lot about what's going on with the person. So I can take a person's statement, and let's go back to when we were kids. When you're a child, or when you have a child, and I know we both do, when a 1 year old, 2 year old child know how to use pronouns, they'll tell you in a heartbeat, that's mine, me, mine. They understand pronouns. So when I'm reading a statement and a person is leaving out pronouns, I know there's a problem, because that's something we do naturally. Even before we can read or write, we know how to use pronouns.
Right.
Lack of pronouns is one of the things you look for in statement analysis. And basically, that's what you're doing now. Just because somebody's leaving out a pronoun, that doesn't mean they're being deceptive. That could be just the way they talk. So you have to kind of know something about that person. So if someone's leaving out pronouns, you want to know why. Why is this person leaving out pronouns? Is it something they naturally do because of their education or where they're from? Or is it something they're doing because subconsciously? And this is done through your autonomic nervous system. They are not even aware that they're doing it. And so you have to make sure you understand why they're doing it. And once you understand that, you can go forward. And I mean, you might not know what they're lying about, but you know that they're being deceptive. And you got a little bit more work to do to figure out why this person is writing the statement the way they're doing it. And for most of the time, they're leaving out information to distance themselves from what happened. Like, for example, if someone say to me, the gun went off, instead of I fired the gun, that tells me that they're trying to distance themselves from that event. They don't want
Right.
nothing to do with it. They're trying to get away from it. And that's the way statement analysis work. You take the words, you go through each word, and you assign a definition of why they use that word, and in what condition did they use it. Sometimes people use past tense instead of present tense. Like if there's a missing person and that person know that that person is dead, they may use a past tense term to identify something about that person. Like he was a great, father. Well, he was means probably
He's
not here.
not anymore.
Yeah. And so that's what statement analysis do for you. When you can read a person's statement, you can get a lot out of it if you know what you're doing.
That's interesting, and I'm kind of a nerd. I'm a geek. I like technology. My wife always jokes around and says you're going to be the lawyer that broke AI, because I like AI. I use it for a lot of stuff, like for fun and
Sure.
seeing what it comes up with, versus what I came up with, seeing who's smarter. I think it's gonna, get us. It's gonna be smarter than we are at some point if it's not already. But it made me kind of think about what you're saying. Because it works off of a large language model. If I had to give a written statement and I run it through AI to clean it up, or what can you, tell me about the statement? Now you got my wheels turning to, maybe we could get together one day and take a statement and have you, kind of do your analysis on it, and have the, computer do an analysis of it and see what comes up. Because I know that there's software out there now, I think, that is being developed that tries to determine if a human wrote it or if AI wrote it. And I do think, in a lot of communications today, people are using AI kind of as like a super spell checker, super grammatics or tone, change the tone to make it more friendly or warmer. And in fact, I had a podcast the other day with a representative from Our Family Wizard,
Mhm.
or the parent platform where they can communicate. And on that platform, now they have a tone moderator. It tells you if you're being a little accusatory or negative in your communications, and then it offers suggestions. So it's going to be interesting how that comes into play with what you're talking about, statement analysis. And because I know I'll confess, I have typed up affidavits, and I ran them through our AI that we use, to have it, check it. I've also, tasked it to see what it would do if I gave it people's statements and, to draft the affidavit on its own. to compare like how thorough it would be and what it might catch. And recently in a case, it actually caught something in some fine print that
Mhm.
I didn't catch. I mean, I thought that was kind of interesting in a statement, like I think, it's kind of funny the way you were talking about the past tense, giving something away, the verb usage and the, just little tiny things like that sometimes can make a big difference in the case. Like, why were you referring to them in the past if they're still alive? The example you gave us. So, Dan, these statements, do you normally go get them yourself? Is it stuff that, statements they've given the police? Do you, how does that work? Or do you develop the questions that you want to get and try to, not trap them, but guide the conversation, into certain key points that you can better analyze? Or how does that work?
Best way to do it is to give that person a notepad and a pen and tell them to write down what happened.
Right.
That's the best way to do it. That way you eliminate the AI, you eliminate all the spell corrector, stuff like that. Is to give them a notepad and let them start writing. And they will write the way they thinking that they want that story to come out. But a lot of times subconsciously they put down stuff that will give a lot of details about what didn't happen or something that happened that they're not telling you about. So that's the best way to do it. Outside of that, you almost have to know how the person speak. Um, that way, if they do use a spell corrector or AI, you can kind of tell, okay, they didn't write this. They don't
Right.
talk like this.
Right.
And you want raw statements. And at the sooner you can get them after the event, the best. A lot of times you ask the question, where do we get them from? Sometimes we get recordings and then we have them transcribed into statements and then we analyze them. I mean, I can analyze a recording just as well because the person speaking probably is something similar to the way they talk. All right. And so you can analyze a recording, or a written statement and a type statement for that matter, because people still make mistakes when they type up statements. But if they use a platform like AI, it makes it a little bit more difficult to do.
Well, I think that it's interesting, what you just said about putting them down in the room with the notepad and tell them to write. Because while I'm not doing it necessarily for the same reasons you're doing it, and I'm not trained in statement analysis, I do that a lot with clients in our practice. I'll give them a legal pad and tell them to write down your narrative, your story, and walk me through it in your own words, because it is interesting, because I'm not there as the lawyer. I never can be. I'm a part of your life, but I wasn't there normally at the event. If I was there at the event, I'm a witness. I'm probably disqualified from representing you. But I think that, getting their words down and getting the timeline down, because one of my jobs is, I probably said this 100 times, but I'll say it again. A good offensive coach understands the defense. A good defensive coach understands offense. I do the same thing, not maybe at the same scale, but as I'm going through that narrative and I'm looking through the records we got, I'm looking through the court docket, if I see that you've omitted big sections of things, like you didn't disclose that you were arrested for a battery charge, or you distanced yourself from these events, or you left out gaps in the story, then my job is to prepare you, or sometimes to reality check you that, hey, we can't just gloss over that fact because it's going to come up.
Yeah.
And if we don't deal with it, I would rather deal with it than have it dealt with on cross examination, as I'm going to deal with it in a very friendly, velvet glove manner, and the other side's going to deal with it with a sledgehammer. So let's go ahead and deal with it early. So I think that that's interesting. Have you ever been able to use statement analysis as a witness? Was it admissible? Were you able to analyze the statement in court for the jury in a jury case, or for the judge in a bench trial?
I mean, the way I use it, like in a case, is I use it to develop questions for an attorney to ask the witness. Like
Okay.
if you know that person referred to somebody in the past tense, then they can bring that out as a question in court. And so, yeah, sure, it can be admissible. I've worked cases where we've asked questions that elicited a response from the person that they wasn't ready for, because now, okay, they're asking me, why did I refer to this person in the past tense? Or why did I say this event in the past tense? The easiest way to kind of tell if a person that, or to use that information, is if you have their statement and you can cross them or question them about that specific topic. A person sitting on a witness stand is under a lot of stress anyway. And so they don't know what you know at that point, but they know you know something that they're being deceptive about. So there are experts. I know Susan Constantine is an expert. She's qualified to testify about body language and statement analysis. So there are people who can do it. I generally use it because I'm not at her level. I generally use it to formulate questions, to conduct further investigations, and things like that. That's the best way to use it.
That's good to know. And so, like for the people out there who are listening, I think maybe that's a good thing to point out. There's evidence that a person takes to stand and gives a report and talks about their report or what they observed, and then there's what kind of goes on behind the scenes, which is work product. So some investigators or some experts are going to be called work product experts. Work product experts don't necessarily have to be disclosed. They may fall under the work product privilege, and they can help develop questions. They can help formulate an opinion about the case. They can fill in gaps for the attorney, but they're not going to be called to testify, or that information is not going to come out with, Dan, can you take the stand and can you tell us what it's going to be behind the scenes, and then you're going to try to elicit that out through other testimony that you're taking from other witnesses. That's a kind of a key difference, and you may have to consider how you hire the private investigator, discuss that with your lawyer if they're going to be work product, if they're going to be testifying experts, and how to handle that and best set that up. So Dan, I'm gonna move us along because time is flying by like it always does with you. Can you explain to me what a CVSA is and how that's used to detect deception and how you use it in family law cases?
A CVSA is computer voice stress analyzer. Basically, and I go back, lie detector. There's no such thing as a lie detector.
My wife's pretty good, Dan.
Yeah, yeah, women are, but it's a true verification. So that we'll use lie detector for the sake of the conversation. But lie detectors have been around since the early 1920s. And over the years, they've advanced. CVSA, when you look at typical polygraph, you're thinking about a, a blood pressure cuff, a finger sensor on your fingertip, um, all these sensors you have to set on a pad, and they put these monitors on you, and then they measure your autonomic nervous system responses. Well, the CVSA, it monitors your voice. Just take a microphone, clip it on your lapel or shirt, and start asking questions. And
It's kind of funny because we started off talking about Hollywood, and the
yeah,
first thing when you're talking about the lie detector, I just think about every movie where you see that needle jumping across the paper, marking the person's heart rate, respiration rate, things of that nature, and I'm sure the audience out there, as soon as they hear lie detector, that's what they're going to be thinking is
yeah,
yeah,
we
that's
get
the first
uh,
visual in my mind is that ink pen scratching across the running tablet, and but now, like you said, it's just a microphone and a computer, right?
yeah, so basically a laptop with software on it, and you hook a microphone up to the person, clip it on their shirt, and you start asking questions. The fascinating thing about it is when a person speaks, they have two frequencies in the voice. You have AM, which is what we're hearing now, and U is AM, and then there's FM frequency. It's inaudible, you can't hear it. So this tester captures the absence of FM frequency in a person's voice, and that's an indication of deception. And it captures it, measures it, and displays it on a computer screen so that we can tell that that person is being deceptive. And that's the way it works. They're
All
very,
right, Dan, I gotta ask you,
I know. Go
has
ahead.
any have you ever done it on Marvell, or has Marvell ever done it on you? Has Marvell ever said, "Get the microphone on, Dan"?
She's a human lie detector test examiner. Yeah,
Let
I
me ex-
generally don't. My kids accuse me of testing them and doing stuff all the time, but I never have. I can tell if they're lying just by talking to them.
well,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
so,
I joke around with that because my wife, she loves to give me a hard time, and I joke with her, and we, have a good relationship. But she always tells me, "You're cross-examining me. I'm not on the witness stand. You don't get to cross-examine me." And I don't mean to, but you just slip into
guilty.
it
I'm
because
guilty of that.
yeah, you slip into it just because it becomes second nature when you have this training, and and I'm trying to break it down into one fact, one question, one fact, and get to the bottom of what happened at the house. And she's like, "You're not cross-examining me," and so we joke around about bringing work home,
Yeah.
and that's why I was playing around. I'm sure my wife out there listening, she's probably thinking right now that she'd like to have one of those microphones for the kids and for
Yeah,
everything.
she's
You know,
calling me right now.
yeah, yeah. But one time, we were joking around, and I forgot what it was, and she didn't believe me, and we were joking around, and I said, "Call Dan." I said, "I'll take the voice stress analysis." And she's like, "Dan's your friend. You've known Dan for 20 years. He ain't gonna tell you." I was like, "Dan," I was like, "the computer ain't gonna lie. I'm just, we were joking around about it, but all the time,
It's very accurate.
I think, that's cool about that is, yeah, we could use it at trial, and it's obviously got those, implications of developing a case or gathering evidence for a case. But one of the things I've used it for or suggested it for was avoiding litigation.
Yes,
My husband is swearing to me up and down that he's not having an affair. I think that he is. I'm certain that he is. But what proof do you have? I don't really have, I said, well, I've suggested it. I said, well, if he doesn't want a divorce and you've already broached the topic of divorce with him, he's saying he's 100% innocent. Why don't you, try this and see what happens if he'll take the test? Like, it's kind of like I hate to say it, like a drug test. If you don't want to take a drug test or you refuse to take a drug test, I can't tell you what the result of the drug test would be, but I got a pretty good idea of what the result's gonna be by your refusal, all right? I got a pretty good suspicion.
same with
If
this.
yeah, if a person says, "Yeah, I'll take the voice analysis, test," then you probably got a good idea, and, if they do take it and they pass it, then, maybe, like I said, maybe you owe an apology for that, but overall, it can be used in positive ways other than just raw litigation and its value there. But
From
let
my
me ask you this,
from my
Dan, and
Go ahead.
and and obviously we might want to use it as work product. Hey, I gave my client this. I know that they're probably being truthful, or this witness is maybe being truthful. Have you ever had the opportunity to take it to court and have your results be admitted by the judge in a criminal or a family law case?
And an example would be I tested a guy who was a sex offender and he wanted to have access to his children. And I had previously tested him to see if he had violated any restrictions. And we used the results of that, to determine, or the judge did, to determine if this person could access their children. So, I mean, if it's stipulated, it can be used in court. Both parties have to stipulate. I mean, a lot of times the CVSA is very effective in cases where you have he said this or she said that, and there's no evidence. It's perfect for cases like that. When one person is accusing the other person of something and they both deny that they're wrong. CVSA is excellent for sexual assault, domestic violence cases, drug use. If you have a child that's you suspect of using drugs, we can test them, see if they're being truthful about that. And this tester I would put it at 90 to 100% accurate with the right examiner and the right questions. And when I say the right questions, questions are important because if I ask a murder suspect, did you kill Mrs. Jones? They can rationalize that and say, no, when I left, Mrs. Jones was alive. Had she got proper medical care, she would still be alive, but she stayed there 24 hours and bled out. So, no, I didn't kill her. But if I ask them, did you stab Mrs. Jones? They can't rationalize that away because that's the action that they did. And the CVSA is excellent for capturing that deception in that question.
What I think it might be useful for too. It's like you said, sometimes you'll have to get a stipulation maybe from both parties to get it in.
Yes.
But where it may have a lot of value too is, and I think I was involved. It's been a long time because I've been over the 20 years. You kind of blend cases together, but I think that once or twice I've used it or seen it used where it went to the prosecutor's office, and I said, "Hey, it may not be admissible. You may not stipulate to it, but I'd really like for you to take a look at this."
Yes.
They voluntarily went down there. They voluntarily gave a statement. They had this machine, or the microphone hooked to them, the laptop, everything, going. and this is what yielded. And, why you may, not want to rely on that, or you may refuse to rely on that. Maybe it doesn't serve justice to prosecute the person, with you having this information before you. Because you got to remember, a lot of cases, the state attorney's office really has the ability to go forward or to dismiss or to
Yes.
maybe offer a lesser offense, to a situation. And I bring that up because sometimes family law gets intersected with criminal law if there's domestic violence, false allegations of child abuse or neglect, sometimes surface up in these cases. And so it may be a tool in that regard. And then, it'd be an interesting question for a social investigator if, a person's been accused of domestic violence and now they're doing a social investigation, which is an expert who kind of evaluates the parties, the parents, the children, home study, and kind of issues a report at the end that kind of help the judge determine what's in the best interest of the children. It'd be interesting to see if they would rely on or if they would accept one of these tests as part of their report or as part of their investigation, to say, hey, while it's not maybe conclusive, I'm not resting my entire hat on this, but this was part of it. And this has helped me reach my conclusion that this was a false allegation or that this really happened.
Yeah, it does. It really does. One of the things, like you said, social investigation, what Marvell does, um, is very effective because a lot of times you have allegations of this, child abuse, like you said, drug use in the family. And one person is saying, I've never done that. The other person is saying you have. It's a very effective tool, not the final decision maker, but it's a very effective tool that can be used to ferret out some of these issues and bring a resolution to things that might make a major difference in it, like you said, a social investigation or a criminal investigation for that matter. So it's a very effective tool that I think is underutilized because people don't understand the technology. But once they understand that the technology is solid, I mean, you think about it, they've mapped every part of our body. Every single part of our body has been mapped by scientists. And they can probe your brain and tell if you're feeling pain or you're thinking about a certain thing. I mean, the technology is so advanced that the lie detector testing
Well,
is
we're
very
gonna
real.
it leads you down a leads me down a tangent again with, what the computer can pick up, what AI, is gonna do, as far as, being able to listen to these things, not only, AM, FM, word choice, that's coming, to even get a more complete picture. And then,
Sure.
if you're talking about mapping the body, if you look at like companies like Neuralink, where they're down to the exact neuron connections that allow you to move your hand if you've been paralyzed. Or I saw the other day, it was wild. It was obviously a laboratory setting doing testing on this type of neuron mapping, and they had a little lab monkey that they had taught to play a video game, and every time he played the video game, he got some banana smoothie if he did good.
Yeah.
And then they showed the clip again, and he's playing the game, and it's a controller with no cords, no nothing. That in fact, you could see the dangling wire for dramatic effect where they had cut it, and they had some kind of technology like that with the neuro mapping, and he was just playing the game with his mind.
Yeah. The technology. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, it's just fascinating. Like, like what you're saying, like, for down the road, I kind of think about when I'm long gone or the next generation of family law attorneys who get to inherit this, what they're going to have at their disposal. It's kind of scary and it's kind of interesting.
It really is because when you look at, let's say, cell phone technology, they now can tell if a cell phone is in your pocket or not when something happened. They can go and from a watch, they can tell when a person actually died by looking at their Fitbit watch or Apple Watch and see when their heart rate spiked and when it kind of stopped. I mean, the technology out there is so incredible that it's like you said, it's scary, but at the same time, it's fascinating.
There's a digital fingerprint for almost everything now.
Yes.
And, I think as the technology gets better integrated. And, I think, of course, with the evolution of AI being able to, deal with vast amounts of information, how long is it before these databases get connected and you can just ask, hey, where was Dan at? What was his heart rate? you know, and maybe it be able to, pull information like that. Like it's kind of scary, like a kind of a omniscient, computer program system that's probably going to end up, how fast was he driving? Which location was he going? Who was the last person he talked to? In these investigations or that law enforcement might have. So it's very, very interesting what the future might look like for our kids or our grandkids. Um, Dan, like I said, moving on to our next topic, because man, we could do full episodes on each one of these. What is the analytic interviewing? What are you looking for with analytic interviewing, and how do you go about carrying that out for somebody?
Analytical interviewing is basically where you're using a person's body language, their statement, and their emotional responses to questioning. Basically, is a little bit more, to me, more advanced than a typical interview. And in a typical interview, you're just asking questions and, capturing a response. When you're doing analytical interviewing, you're combining the body language with the tone of voice, with the words they use, and it's telling you what's going on with that person, if they're being deceptive or not. Because a lot of times, I give an example. We have interviewed people who shake their head yes to a question as they say no.
All right.
Tell you a lot about that question that the person is answering. You ask them, did you do X, Y, and Z? They're saying no as they shake their head yes. So that's analytical interviewing. You're taking that information and you're not pointing it out to that person, but you're capturing that. Why is this person saying yes as they say no? It's inconsistent. And that's what you do with analytical interviewing. Sort of like statement analysis, but you're combining the statement analysis with body language, with the tone of voice and the words that they use. And you're telling if that person is being deceptive or if they're being honest, because it should be natural. It
Now, is that
should.
something you just do in real time, or is that something that best lends itself to like a video statement or a video deposition or something like that?
You can do it real time, but video is the best because you can stop, slow it down, and look at it. You can stop and look at the micro expressions in the face and stuff like that. So it's very effective if you have it on video, but you can do it real time if you're good at it.
Well, there's not a case now that we deal with that doesn't involve a cell phone, whether it's text messaging, call logs, almost
Yes.
every case, it's honestly some of the biggest exhibits are text communication logs, text messaging records, things of that nature. And, as far as I know, there is no mass export, on my iPhone. You can screenshot 4 or 5 at a time, or you can, but I'll tell you as a lawyer, I will do it because I have to do it. It's my job, but it does not make my job easier, and it does not make the bill for the client lighter when you've screenshotted every 3 or 4 messages, then the next screenshot 3 or 4 messages, and then we have to go through those, download them, print them, organize them, make sure that people didn't give us gaps, selectively picking the communication. And a lot of times too, if you look at your iPhones or your probably your Android phones too, I'm just much more experienced with iPhone, not all of them have a date and a time next to them. You have to kind of swipe over to see the date and the time, and then you don't really necessarily have the timing of everything and what was going on. Was that no statement in reference to this? Did someone delete a message in between these?
Right.
So, that kind of gets us into kind of forensics on the cell phones and what you can do there. Tell us your kind of involvement in that field, and how that could come into play for family law and building better cases.
Sure. Cell phones are very fascinating. I mean, if you have a cell phone, you're basically carrying around a tracker because that's what it's doing. It's tracking everywhere you go. I don't care if you turn off the notification, you're still tracking. I mean, the not notification, but the location information, you're still being tracked. And basically, you carrying around a computer that's tracking everything you do. One of the investigations we do, and it can be done in family law cases, is called pattern of life. And a pattern of life investigation is where you take the person's, it's basically a digital footprint of their daily routine, their habits, their relationships, who they talk to. You can almost tell when they go to sleep, when they wake up, when they're at work, when they're at lunch. I mean, the cell phone has almost everything you want about a person. And you can take a downloaded cell phone extraction where they extract all the data from the phone. And you can outline a person's life from morning to night, when they wake up and when they go to bed, and even through the night. So cell phone is very, very valuable. App usage, all that stuff, GPS locations, all that stuff can be extracted from a phone. And I've had people or cases where people had videos and stuff like that on their phones. They deleted them and they thought they were gone. These extractions can pull it back. Some stuff can be very embarrassing and very incriminating. So cell phone, when you look at a criminal case, about 90% of the evidence, 80 to 90 is forensics, whether it be a computer, a phone, or some type of video from a Ring camera. Almost all the evidence. It used to be first fingerprints was the big thing, and then DNA, and now is forensics. Very, very huge part of any investigation, family law, civil, criminal, you name it.
I think, that's, it's fascinating because we all voluntarily want a cell phone. You can't live without a cell phone. But, it kind of leads to sometimes deeper questions of, for convenience, how much of our privacy or our rights, have we basically given away to the government, third parties, the ability to know when I'm going to sleep at night, when I wake up, who I'm talking to, what I'm talking about. It's out there to be discovered now, whether we like it or not. So I know I've done a motion to have a phone produced for forensic evaluation as a lawyer, because I didn't want to be part of anybody bringing the phone down, not having permission, who owned the phone, and a lot of the data privacy rights. But if you get a court order, to produce it or have it inspected, I felt like that was the best method for that particular case. So when someone brings you a phone, how do you know it's their phone, or how do you verify that it's okay to pull the data from that phone?
Well, it involves a little bit of trust, one, and two, when you open up the phone, I mean, it usually it's assigned to that person. I always ask them to bring me like some type of phone bill or something like that to show that they own the phone. But sometimes that's not available, and you have to just use a chain of custody. Mr. Smith brought this phone in on this date, and you write down the serial number and all that information of the phone. He signs it, and then I have to accept that he says it's his phone. He's signing documents saying it's his phone, and then you do the best you can to kind of make sure you have to keep a good chain of custody. Once you get that phone and that extraction is done, it's going to download all of the phone's data, all the serial numbers, even the SIM card serial number will be on that extraction. And so you'll start having all that information. Then you can tell who owns that phone. A lot of times you can get a report from the phone company, and law enforcement, that's what they do. They get a report from the phone company showing who that phone was issued to and who pays the bill. So it is it's a tough, if you're doing it privately, like a private investigator, a way of identifying who really owns that phone. But usually, if a person gives you a phone, I make them sign documents saying that it's their phone and they have permission to give it to me.
And that's interesting because, like in my household, I'm pretty sure that the phone bill, the account's in my name, but my wife has a phone. You know what I mean? Her
Yeah,
phone. It's her. I consider it her phone. And you get to the question of, who owns that phone? Is it maybe the account holder? Is it the person who has it? Do they put that phone on your account? So to me that kind of gets kind of a little tricky, but I think it's very fascinating to think about. I'll use my phone for instance. It has emails, it has text messages, it's got GPS coordinates, it's probably got access to Google Docs and other cloud services. It's backed up to an iCloud account.
pictures. You got
Yeah,
photographs.
yeah. You got and what people don't realize sometimes is, like my wife will come and she'll say, look, in this coolest feature on Apple, now it categorizes all the pictures we
Right.
took at Disney World into a folder, or, into a group, Lake Buena Vista or Disney World. And what people don't realize is sometimes when you take those pictures, there's metadata associated to the picture. If you have the right experts and people to be able to get that,
Yeah.
that'll say, no, that picture was not taken on 23rd Street. That picture was taken on 15th Street, or it was taken in this city, and it kind of sheds light on a lot of stuff if if you can extract all the data. I think there's more data than sometimes the human mind can comprehend. And one of the things I'm always getting pitched, new services. And I know one of the things I saw recently come across was an email where somebody was trying to get some of my time to, have a meeting with me to discuss metadata analysis using AI, where AI might go through the 3,000, 4,000 pictures on a phone. And then you could say, I need pictures, show me every picture that was taken on 23rd Street, show me this, show me that, and it would try to go through the metadata, I think, and organize them that way, or point out things that are, not consistent. If you're thinking the picture was taken here and it's not, or it was taken at this time, or it's being purported to be taken at that time, and then you find out that it was, not taken at that time, and then you brought up something that I think is probably the new technology of the year that's been in the cases for about the last year or so is the Ring doorbell.
Yes.
I've had in the last year several cases that were really, what made it or broke it, depending on what side of the aisle you were on in that case, was an interview that was happening with DCF, and the guy was smart enough to go onto the porch, and the Ring doorbell picked up the entire interview, and we had it sent to the court reporter and had it transcribed. We had a case where a Ring doorbell picked up an incident of domestic violence. Also, Ring doorbells establishing patterns of when people were home and when they were not home, when they left, when they came back, coming, in and out the front door. Think
Things
that's
to think about.
yeah. I mean, people just forget that hey, I put that up there, and now it's either being used for me or it's being used against me. But there's video footage of what happened.
I
So
always tell people that if you leave your house for an hour and you go somewhere, you're going to be on video at the minimum 8 to 10 times.
yeah, yeah, it's the world we live in, and like I said, it's scary. It's got positives, but it's also scary for somebody who maybe values privacy and is more constitutionally minded. How much should the government know, or how much should these big corporations know? But they have access to it, and it's there.
Once you give them access to it, it belongs to them.
Yeah, yeah. And that's I think that's a thing that is gonna really probably be the one of the topics that's discussed in the next 50 years. How do we maintain our privacy rights? But obviously I can't communicate using smoke signals. I need to be able to use a cell phone without opening up my entire private life to the world. So
Yeah. And
I
it
think
really,
it may be something that gets revisited, I think, or has to get addressed. But Dan, we were set for the talk for about 45 minutes, and we've already went into an hour. And I definitely want to get you back on. And if it's, I don't know if you'd be okay with this, but maybe we could find a phone, not a phone for a real case. Maybe I could go to Verizon and get something. It'd be great to do one of these, and actually test the phone out. Like I'll go here, go there, and then see the data that you pull from the phone, and do some of these things. I think it'd be interesting to do that and see how these technologies, really work and give people a better idea about them and how, and their uses. But yeah, I feel like we could do a full episode on each one of these and go into even more detail. But so I got it. Well, before I let you go, I want to ask, one kind of a personal thing, kind of rapid fire, out of all of these tools that you have at your disposal, which one of them do you think is like your biggest value proposition to a client? If you were one of the clients going through one of these cases, is there one of these that you would, to go to? If I could have one thing, I'd want the cell phone, I'd want the voice analysis. Which one would your go to that you feel like is the most useful in most of the cases?
it's a tough question. A good question, but tough because it really depends on the situation. Like some cases, a lie detector tester is excellent for ferreting out these issues that can't be resolved by asking people alone and there's no physical evidence to show anything. At the same time, you can take a person's cell phone and go through it, and man, you can get a lot of data without even asking questions. So I would say they're pretty close: cell phone forensics, lie detector testing, or CVSA, and also the statement analysis. All that stuff I think is important. But if I had to, I think cell phone forensics is probably the number one, because everybody has a cell phone and everybody use their cell phone. A lot of people have, I mean, cell phones can hold a lot of information. I've seen cell phone extractions that were 64 gig of information. That's a lot of data on from a phone. And the phone wasn't full, it had more room to put more data. 20,000 photographs on a cell phone. I mean, you can get a lot of data. So I would say cell phone forensics, number one. And then, of course, CVSA polygraph is another way of getting at what you're looking for. And then the statement analysis and the analytical interviewing also highly important. But it just depends on what type of case you have.
So Dan, if I know how to get up with you, but there's hopefully other attorneys out there who might be listening, and clients who are going through this. How can they get in touch with you if they need your services?
They can call our office at 850-248-8508, or they can go to our website, www.estessandassociates.com. We have information on there where they can contact us, and or send me an email at dan@estessandassociates.com. Any of those methods, they can get in touch with us, and we'll be glad to talk to them and see if we can help them.
And one of the things I'm going to leave off with is, putting my attorney cap on. Like Dan mentioned, if you're working with an attorney or you're facing an issue like this and you think that you might be looking at litigation, talk to your attorney first, consult an attorney. It may be able to help hone in and narrow the issues that you need the investigator for, or help you get the most bang for your buck as to what they're investigating and how it can be used later on in court if you think that's the case. Before you give any statement to an investigator, whether it's your investigator or someone investigator asking you, consult with your lawyer. Because if Dan's asking you a statement on behalf of an opposing party, insurance company, something like that, and you're not represented yet, that could raise issues potentially. So before doing any of this, consult with your lawyer. Have your lawyer maybe reach out to Dan, put their heads together, come up with a plan. And if somebody's asking you to give a statement about something, it's always smart to call your lawyer before you give any type of statement on anything, to make sure that you're not accidentally doing anything wrong, or you're not waiving any of your rights, in that regard. So, Dan, we're definitely going to have you back on and go through a lot of this stuff in much more detail. And
Sure.
maybe even, like I said, maybe I can get my hands on a phone or something that we could actually do the extraction on, and you could kind of share the results, and we could see how accurate it is, from where I took it, what I did with it, what I took pictures of, and see how it ferrets out, and all the data you're able to get from it. So Dan, I'm gonna sign off, and I just want to thank you for giving us the last hour of your time to bring clarity to a lot of these issues, and really do appreciate it and value our relationship, personally and professionally. And tell Marvell that we said hello, and we're looking forward to getting her in the hot seat one of these days to learn more about social investigations and child custody issues and mental health. But so far, Dan, she's been elusive. I may have to have you track her down for me.
I can do that.
All right, Dan.
I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you, and I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Dan. And we'll see you next time. And if you're new to the channel, if you would like, share, subscribe. We're just here to try to put this information out in the community so that people can get a better understanding of family law, and the people who are ancillary to building your cases, or conduits of information that you might really need that might help you through this time. Dan, we'll have you back on, and thanks for giving us your time today.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.